Captain Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he guided his cargo ship toward Luna Station. The old freighter groaned under the weight of mining equipment bound for the outer colonies. After 20 years of hauling freight across the solar system, Jake had grown used to the routine. Load cargo, jump to hyperspace, deliver goods, repeat. It was a simple life, and he liked it that way. The year was 2387, and humanity had enjoyed peace for over 3 centuries. The great wars that once shook the galaxy were now just stories told in history books. Most people had forgotten about the massive warships that once protected human space. Those ships had been put away long ago, stored in secret locations that few people knew about. Jake docked his ship at Luna Station and began the usual paperwork. The station bustled with activity as merchants, miners, and travelers moved through its corridors. Children played in the recreation areas while their parents conducted business. It was a peaceful scene that had been repeated countless times across human space. That peace was about to end. The first sign of trouble came through the deep space communication array. Commander Lisa Harper sat at her monitoring station on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. She had been tracking radio signals from distant star systems for the past 15 years. Most of the time, her job was boring. She listened to routine transmissions from exploration ships and colony reports. But today was different. A weak signal came through the speakers, crackling with static. Lisa adjusted the controls and tried to clean up the transmission. What she heard made her blood run cold. "This is the Zalari Coalition calling any human. Vessels," the alien voice said in broken English. "We are under attack. Our worlds are being destroyed. We need help. We have heard stories of the human war giants. Please, if these ships are real, we beg you to help us." Lisa sat back in her chair, her heart pounding. The Zalari were a peaceful race that lived in the Kepler 442 system, about 40 light years from Earth. They had been allies with humanity for over a century, trading goods and sharing knowledge. But war giants? Lisa had heard whispers about such ships, but she had always thought they were just legends. She recorded the message and sent it through secure channels to Earth Command. Within hours, her communication console was buzzing with incoming calls from high-ranking military officers. The message had reached the very top of the human government. On Mars, Admiral Ben Richards was enjoying his retirement when the call came. He had been the youngest admiral in human history, commanding fleets during the last great conflict 200 years ago. Now he was an old man, content to tend his garden and write his memoirs. But when he heard the Zalari distress call, his peaceful retirement came to an end. Richards knew the truth about the war giants. He had been there when they were built, and he had been there when they were put into storage. The massive ships were humanity's greatest secret, hidden away in case they were ever needed again. Most people believed the old warships had been scrapped long ago. They were wrong. The Admiral made a secure call to Earth's president. "The Devourers are back," he said simply. "We need to wake up the giants." President Maria Santos had been in office for only 2 years. She was a diplomat who had built her career on maintaining peace between different human colonies. The idea of war was foreign to her. But when Richards explained what the Devourers were capable of, she understood the threat. The Devourers were not like other alien races. They were machines built by some long-dead civilization to consume everything in their path. They would strip entire planets of their resources, leaving nothing but empty husks floating in space. 200 years ago, they had attacked human space, forcing humanity to build the war giants to defend themselves. The war had lasted 50 years and cost billions of lives. In the end, humanity had driven the Devourers away, but at a terrible price. The war giants had been so powerful that many people feared them almost as much as they feared the enemy. When the war ended, the ships were hidden away, and their existence was classified. Now the Devourers had returned, and they were attacking humanity's allies. The Zalari had no way to defend themselves against such a threat. Their ships were designed for exploration and trade, not war. Without help, their entire civilization would be wiped out. Back on Luna Station, Jake Morrison received an unusual message on his personal communicator. It was from Admiral Richards himself asking Jake to report to a classified location on Titan. Jake stared at the message in confusion. He was just a cargo hauler. What could the military want with him? But Jake had served on warships before becoming a civilian. He had been a captain in the human navy during the border conflicts with the Rigel pirates. His record showed that he was a skilled commander who could handle himself in combat. More importantly, he had experience with the old ship designs that the war giants were based on. Other veterans across human space received similar messages. Sarah Collins, who now flew mining equipment but had once been the best pilot in the fleet. Tony Martinez, who ran a weapons shop but had been a gunnery officer on a battle cruiser. Kate Sullivan, who worked as a civilian engineer but had helped design some of the most advanced ships in human space. They were all being called back to service, though they didn't know why yet. The government was being careful to keep the war giants secret until they were ready to reveal them. But word was already spreading through unofficial channels that something big was happening. Dr. Alex Chen, a xenobiologist working on Earth, received access to classified files that made him sick to his stomach. The files contained detailed reports about the Devourers and their methods. They didn't just destroy civilizations. They studied them first, learning everything they could about their technology and tactics. Then they used that knowledge to make themselves stronger. The attack on the Zolari wasn't random. The Devourers were testing humanity's response. They wanted to see if the war giants were real, and if they were, they wanted to face them in battle. It was a trap, but humanity had no choice but to walk into it. As Jake Morrison prepared to leave Luna Station, he looked out at the peaceful scene around him. Families were saying goodbye to travelers, merchants were closing deals, and children were laughing as they played. None of them knew that their peaceful world was about to change forever. The sleeping giants were about to wake up. The transport ship carrying Jake Morrison descended through the thick orange clouds of Titan. As they broke through the atmosphere, Jake saw something that took his breath away. Massive doors were opening in the moon's surface, revealing underground hangars that stretched for kilometers. Inside those hangars, 4 enormous shapes lay in darkness. The war giants. Jake had heard stories about these ships, but seeing them in person was different. Each vessel was over 10 kilometers long, their hulls black as space itself. They looked like sleeping monsters, waiting to be awakened. The UES Leviathan was the largest, its bow shaped like the head of some ancient sea creature. Next to it lay the UES Behemoth, UES Colossus, and UES Titan. Chief Engineer Kate Sullivan stood on the observation deck, watching as crews of technicians swarmed over the ships like ants. She had been working for 3 days straight, trying to bring the giants back to life. The ships had been in storage for 200 years, and their systems were more complex than anything built in modern times. The fusion reactors are coming online, Kate reported to Admiral Richards over her communicator. But the weapon systems are going to need more time. These ships were built with technology we barely understand anymore. Kate had studied the old blueprints, but the war giants were built during humanity's darkest hour. The engineers who designed them had pushed technology to its limits, creating weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Some of the systems were so advanced that even Kate, one of the best engineers in human space, had trouble understanding how they worked. Dr. Alex Chen arrived on Titan carrying classified files about the Devourers. He set up his equipment in one of the smaller hangars and began analyzing data from the old war. What he found made him worry even more about the coming battle. The Devourers learn from every fight, Alex explained to the gathering officers. 200 years ago, they adapted to our weapons and tactics. Now they've had time to grow stronger. The ships attacking the Zolari are twice the size of the ones we fought before. The doctor showed them images captured by Zolari scouts before their communication systems were destroyed. The Devourer ships looked like mechanical spiders, their hulls covered in weapons that glowed with deadly energy. At the center of their fleet was something new, a massive construct that dwarfed even the war giants. They call it the Prime Harvester, Alex continued. It's not just a ship, It's a mobile factory that can build new Devourer vessels using materials from destroyed planets. If we don't stop it, it will create an army too large for us to defeat. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison was getting his first look at the inside of the UES Leviathan. The ship's corridors were wide enough to drive vehicles through, and its walls were lined with displays that had been dark for centuries. Everything was built on a massive scale, designed to house a crew of thousands. In the ship's command center, Jake found something that surprised him. The main computer was activating on its own, lights flickering to life across its surface. A holographic figure appeared above the central console, an elderly woman in an admiral's uniform. "I am Admiral Helen Stone," the figure said in a clear voice. "I commanded this vessel during the Second Devourer War. My consciousness has been preserved in the ship's quantum memory to assist future crews." Jake stared at the hologram in amazement. Admiral Stone had been a legend, the greatest naval commander in human history. She had died 50 years ago, but her knowledge and experience lived on in the ship's computer systems. "The Devourers have returned," Jake told the hologram. "We need your help to fight them." Admiral Stone nodded gravely. "I have been monitoring communications. The enemy is stronger now, but so are you. This ship was built to evolve alongside its crew. The longer you serve aboard her, the better she will understand your needs." Across the hangar, other veterans were arriving to crew the war giants. Sarah Collins had been assigned as the chief pilot of the UES Leviathan. She was amazed by the ship's flight controls, which were more advanced than anything she had ever seen. The vessel could move like a fighter despite its enormous size. Tony Martinez took charge of the weapon systems. The war giants carried enough firepower to level continents, but Tony knew that raw power wouldn't be enough against the Devourers. The enemy ships could adapt to different types of weapons, so the human fleet would need to be clever in how they used their arsenal. Commander Lisa Harper arrived from Europa to handle communications between the four ships. Her job would be to coordinate the fleet's movements and maintain contact with human command. She was nervous about the responsibility, but Admiral Richards assured her that she was the best person for the job. As the days passed, more volunteers arrived to crew the war giants. Most of them were civilians who had never served in the military, but they were willing to fight to protect their families and allies. Engineers, doctors, teachers, and shop owners all put aside their peaceful lives to become warriors. The training was intense. Each crew member had to learn how to operate systems that were far more complex than anything in civilian use. The ship's holographic training programs ran battle simulations that tested every aspect of combat, from weapons targeting to damage control. Kate Sullivan worked around the clock to bring all four ships to full power. The fusion reactors were running smoothly, but the weapon systems required careful calibration. Each war giant carried different types of armaments, designed to work together as a coordinated fleet. The UES Leviathan was the command ship, equipped with the most advanced sensors and communication systems. The UES Behemoth was a pure warship, its hull bristling with heavy cannons and missile launchers. The UES Colossus specialized in long-range bombardment, while the UES Titan was designed for close combat. Dr. Chen spent his time studying the enemy, trying to understand how the Devourers had changed during their long absence. He discovered that they had been busy in distant parts of the galaxy, consuming entire civilizations and adding their technology to their own. The enemy humanity would face was far more dangerous than the one they had fought before. As the final preparations were made, Jake stood on the bridge of the UES Leviathan and looked out at his fellow war giants. In a few hours, they would begin their journey to the Kepler 442 system. It would take months to reach the Zalari homeworld, and Jake knew that not all of them might return. But humanity had no choice. The Devourers were coming, and only the war giant stood between them and the destruction of everything humans held dear. The sleeping giants were awake, and they were ready for war. The four war giants moved through space like ancient gods awakening from a long sleep. Their massive hulls cut through the darkness between stars, traveling toward the distant Kepler 442 system. The journey would take 4 months, even with their advanced hyperspace drives. During that time, the crews had to transform from peaceful civilians into a fighting force capable of facing humanity's deadliest enemy. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Leviathan, watching the stars streak past through the main viewing screen. The ship felt alive around him, its systems humming with power that had been dormant for 2 centuries. Every day brought new surprises as the vessel's advanced computer systems came online and revealed capabilities that even the old records hadn't mentioned. "The ship is learning about us," Admiral Stone's hologram explained to Jake during one of their daily briefings. "These vessels were designed to adapt to their crews. The longer you serve aboard her, the better she will respond to your commands. In time, the ship will anticipate your needs before you even voice them." The training was unlike anything the crew had ever experienced. The war giants contained holographic combat simulators that could recreate entire battles from the previous war against the Devourers. Jake and his officers spent hours each day fighting virtual enemies, learning tactics that had been perfected through years of bloody conflict. Sarah Collins proved to be a natural at piloting the massive ship. Despite its enormous size, the UES Leviathan could move with surprising grace. The vessel's gravitational drives allowed it to change direction instantly, a capability that would be crucial in the coming battle. "It's like flying a mountain that thinks it's a fighter," Sarah told Jake after completing a particularly difficult training exercise. "The ship wants to dance, but it hits like a planet killer." Tony Martinez was having his own revelations about the weapon systems. The war giants carried armaments that defied easy understanding. Some fired streams of compressed matter that could punch through any known armor. Others launched missiles that could track targets across entire star systems. The most mysterious weapons were locked behind security codes that only activated during actual combat. These ships were built by people who knew they might have to fight gods, Tony explained to his weapons crew. "Every system has backups and every backup has its own backup. They weren't taking any chances." Commander Lisa Harper coordinated communications between the 4 ships. Each war giant had a crew of over 3,000 people, and keeping them all working together required constant effort. She established daily conferences between the ship commanders, sharing intelligence and refining their battle plans. During the journey, disturbing news continued to arrive from the Kepler 442 system. Dr. Alex Chen monitored the increasingly desperate transmissions from the Zalari. Their beautiful crystal cities were being harvested one by one, their populations either destroyed or absorbed into the Devourer collective. "The enemy is taking their time," Alex reported during a fleet-wide briefing. "They're not just destroying the Zalari worlds, they're studying them. Every day they delay is another day they learn about our allies' technology and tactics." The most troubling news came from other alien civilizations along their route. Lisa had established contact with several species, hoping to gather intelligence about Devourer movements. What she learned made everyone on the fleet worry about what they were flying toward. The Corvani Republic had been attacked 6 months ago. Their entire fleet of warships had been destroyed in a matter of hours. The Devourer vessels had adapted to their weapons so quickly that the battle became a massacre. The few survivors spoke of enemy ships that changed their hull configuration during combat, making themselves immune to whatever weapons were fired at them. The Threx Empire had lasted longer, fighting for 3 weeks before their worlds fell. Their military commanders reported that the Devourers seemed to know their battle plans before they implemented them. It was as if the enemy could read their minds and counter every strategy before it was attempted. Most disturbing of all was the fate of the Nexari Confederation. They had been humanity's closest allies for over a century, sharing technology and military doctrine. When the Devourers attacked their core worlds, the Nexari had used tactics copied from human military manuals. The enemy had crushed them effortlessly, as if they had been expecting exactly those strategies. "The Devourers have been preparing for us specifically," Dr. Chen concluded after analyzing all the reports. "They've been studying every civilization that uses human tactics or technology. This isn't a random expansion. It's a deliberate campaign to learn how to defeat us." Jake felt the weight of that revelation. The enemy wasn't just attacking the Zalari to consume their resources. They were using the battle as bait to draw out the human war giants. Every civilization that fell was teaching the Devourers more about how humans fought and how their technology worked. Admiral Richards, commanding the overall fleet from the UES Titan, called a private meeting with the other ship captains. The four commanders met in a secure holographic conference, their images flickering across the vast distances between their vessels. "We're walking into a trap," the admiral said without preamble. "The enemy knows we're coming, and they've been preparing for this moment for 200 years. They want us to come to Kepler 442 because they think they can finally defeat the war giants." Captain Nancy Price of the UES Behemoth spoke up. "So what do? We can't abandon the Zalari, but we can't ignore the fact that this is exactly what the enemy wants." "We do what humans have always done," Jake replied. "We spring the trap and make them regret setting it." The journey continued, but the mood aboard the ships had changed. The crews trained harder, pushing themselves to master systems that grew more complex each day. Engineers worked around the clock to optimize the ship's performance. Weapons teams practiced coordinated attacks that could overwhelm any defense. But despite all their preparation, everyone knew they were heading toward a battle that would determine the fate of not just the Zalari, but potentially all life in the galaxy. The Devourers had grown stronger during their long absence, and they had learned from every defeat they had suffered in the past. As the war giants approached the halfway point of their journey, long-range sensors began detecting massive energy signatures from the direction of the Kepler 442 system. The enemy fleet was larger than anyone had imagined, and it was growing stronger every day as more Devourer ships arrived from across the galaxy. The sleeping giants were awake, but they were flying toward an enemy that had spent 2 centuries preparing for their return. The greatest battle in human history was about to begin, and nobody knew if even the legendary war giants would be enough to win it. The final test of humanity's resolve was waiting among the stars. The human war giants dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and what they saw filled their crews with horror. The beautiful blue and green worlds of the Zalari were now gray and lifeless. Massive Devourer constructs hung in orbit around each planet like mechanical spiders, strip mining the surface and loading the materials into their cargo holds. Jake Morrison stared at the tactical display on the UES Leviathan's bridge. The enemy fleet was enormous, far larger than intelligence reports had predicted. Over 200 Devourer ships patrolled the system, ranging from small fighters the size of human frigates to massive constructs that rivaled the war giants themselves. At the center of it all hung the Prime Harvester, a mechanical monstrosity that dwarfed everything else in the system. The ship was over 15 kilometers long and covered in construction bays, where new Devourer vessels were being assembled from harvested materials. As Jake watched, 3 new enemy ships launched from the Harvester's production decks. "My God," Sarah Collins whispered from the pilot station. "They're building an entire fleet while they fight." Admiral Stone's hologram appeared beside Jake, her expression grim as she analyzed the enemy formation. "The Prime Harvester is new," she said. "During the last war, the Devourers couldn't construct new ships this quickly. They've grown far more dangerous than we anticipated." Dr. Alex Chen's voice crackled over the communication system from his position aboard the UES Titan. "I'm detecting massive energy readings from the Harvester. It's not just building ships, it's analyzing everything it consumes. The construct is learning from every piece of Zalari technology it processes." Commander Lisa Harper worked frantically at her station, trying to establish contact with any surviving Zalari forces. After several tense minutes, she managed to reach a small group of refugees hiding in the asteroid belt beyond the system's outer planets. "This is Commander Zal of the Zalari Defense Force," came the weak transmission. "Our fleet has been destroyed and our worlds are lost. We have perhaps 50 ships remaining, mostly civilian vessels with no weapons. We thought no one was coming to help us." Jake opened a channel to the Zalari survivors. "This is Captain Morrison of the Human War Giants. We're here to help. Can you tell us about the enemy's capabilities?" "The Devourers adapt to everything we throw at them," Zal replied, his voice filled with despair. "Our plasma weapons became useless after the first day of fighting. Our defensive shields might as well have been made of paper. Every time we developed a new tactic, they countered it within hours." Admiral Richards coordinated the human fleet's approach. The 4 war giants spread out in a diamond formation, with the UES Leviathan taking point. Their plan was simple but dangerous: charge directly at the Prime Harvester while the other enemy ships were still scattered throughout the system. The battle began when the Devourers detected the approaching war giants. Dozens of enemy ships turned toward the human fleet, their hulls rippling and changing as they adapted for combat. Some grew additional weapon mounts while others extended massive shield generators. Tony Martinez opened fire first, the UES Leviathan's main gun sending streams of compressed matter toward the nearest Devourer vessels. The enemy ship's adaptive armor absorbed the first few shots, but Tony had expected that. He switched to a different type of weapon, catching the Devourers before they could adjust their defenses. 3 enemy ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light, but dozens more were already moving to surround the human fleet. The Devourers fought like a single organism, each ship coordinating perfectly with the others. When one vessel was destroyed, the others immediately learned from its destruction and adapted their own defenses. Sarah Collins pushed the UES Leviathan through a complex series of maneuvers, dodging enemy fire while keeping their weapons locked on target. The massive ship moved like a living thing, its gravitational drives allowing it to change direction in ways that defied physics. "The ship is anticipating my moves," Sarah reported to Jake. "It's like it knows what I'm going to do before I do it." The UES Behemoth and UES Colossus engaged a group of larger Devourer constructs, their heavy weapons trading devastating volleys. Captain Nancy Price coordinated her ship's attacks with surgical precision, but the enemy vessels were learning from each exchange. What had worked in the first minutes of battle became less effective as time passed. The most serious threat came from the Prime Harvester itself. The massive construct began launching waves of newly constructed fighters, each one incorporating countermeasures against human weapons. The enemy was literally evolving its forces during the battle, adapting to every tactic the war giants employed. "We're fighting an enemy that gets stronger every second," Jake realized as he watched the tactical display. The Devourer ships were now shrugging off attacks that had devastated them at the start of the battle. The UES Colossus took heavy damage when a group of adapted Devourer ships focused their fire on its port side. The war giant's mighty shields flickered and failed, allowing enemy weapons to tear into its hull. Captain David Kim fought to keep his ship operational, but systems were failing throughout the vessel. "Colossus is losing power to main weapons," Kim reported. "We can't maintain our position much longer." Dr. Chen had been monitoring the battle from his station aboard the UES Titan, analyzing how quickly the Devourers adapted to human tactics. What he discovered made his blood run cold. "The enemy isn't just learning from our current attacks," he announced over the fleet communication channel. "They're accessing data from the previous war. Somehow they remember everything we did 200 years ago." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. If the Devourers had access to historical battle data, then every tactic in the human military handbook was already known to them. The enemy had been preparing for this exact confrontation for centuries. Admiral Stone's hologram flickered as enemy jamming systems tried to disrupt the ship's communications. "There is something they haven't accounted for," she said to Jake. The war giants were built with a final protocol, something the Devourers never encountered in the previous war. But using it will require all 4 ships to work together. The battle raged around them as Jake tried to understand what the hologram meant. The UES Colossus was falling behind, its damaged systems unable to keep pace with the fleet. Enemy ships swarmed around the wounded war giant like predators sensing weakness. Commander Lisa Harper coordinated a desperate rescue attempt, directing the other 3 war giants to form a protective formation around their damaged sister ship. But even as they fought to save the Colossus, more Devourer vessels were arriving from other parts of the system. The Prime Harvester hung in the distance like a mechanical god, its production bays working constantly to create new enemies. Jake realized that they couldn't win a conventional battle against an foe that grew stronger with every passing moment. "What's this final protocol?" Jake asked Admiral Stone's hologram. The artificial intelligence looked at him with eyes that held the weight of countless battles. "The war giants weren't just built to fight the Devourers, Captain. They were built to carry something that could destroy them completely. But the cost will be higher than you can imagine." As enemy fire intensified around them, Jake knew they were running out of time and options. The sleeping giants had awakened, but they were facing an enemy that had spent 2 centuries preparing for their return. The battle was going badly for the human fleet. The UES Colossus limped through space with half its weapons offline, while the other war giants fought desperately to keep the growing Devourer swarm at bay. Enemy ships surrounded them on all sides, their adaptive hulls now immune to most human weapons. Jake Morrison watched the tactical display with growing desperation. For every Devourer ship they destroyed, 2 more launched from the Prime Harvester. The massive construct continued its relentless production, churning out new vessels that incorporated everything the enemy had learned from the battle. "Admiral, Stone," Jake called to the hologram. "Tell me about this final protocol. We're running out of time." The artificial intelligence of the long-dead Admiral looked at him with sad eyes. "The war giants carry a quantum virus, Captain. It was designed during the darkest days of the previous war, when we thought we might lose everything. The virus can disrupt the Devourer hive mind, but delivering it requires one of our ships to penetrate the Prime Harvester's defenses." Jake understood immediately. It was a suicide mission. One war giant would have to ram through the enemy fleet and get close enough to the Harvester to deploy the virus. The ship and its crew would almost certainly be destroyed in the process. Sarah Collins overheard the conversation from her pilot station. "The Leviathan is the fastest of the 4 ships," she said quietly. "If anyone can get through their defenses, it's us." Tony Martinez nodded grimly from his weapons console. "The ship's been learning our tactics for months. If we're going to do this, now is the time." Admiral Richards's voice crackled over the communication system from the UES Titan. "Morrison, you don't have to do this. We can find another way." "No, sir," Jake replied. "The virus has to be delivered, and we're the best chance of getting it there. The other ships need to create a distraction." Commander Lisa Harper coordinated the final plan. The UES Behemoth, UES Colossus, and UES Titan would launch a coordinated attack on the Devourer fleet, drawing as many enemy ships away from the Prime Harvester as possible. Meanwhile, the UES Leviathan would use the chaos to make a high-speed run at the massive construct. Dr. Alex Chen worked frantically to prepare the quantum virus for deployment. The weapon existed as pure information, a digital plague that could spread through the Devourer network and corrupt their shared consciousness. But it had to be delivered directly to the Prime Harvester's central processing core. "The virus will take several minutes to spread through their entire network," Alex explained over the communication channel. "You'll need to keep them busy while it does its work." The final assault began with the 3 remaining war giants opening fire with everything they had. The space around them filled with energy beams, missiles, and streams of compressed matter. The Devourer ships responded by clustering together, their adaptive hulls shifting to absorb the incoming fire. Jake watched the enemy formation thin out as ships moved to engage the other war giants. It was now or never. "Sarah, take us in. Full speed." The UES Leviathan accelerated toward the Prime Harvester like a guided missile. Sarah pushed the ship's gravitational drives to their maximum output, weaving between enemy vessels that tried to intercept them. The massive war giant moved with impossible grace, its hull singing with the strain of high-speed maneuvering. Enemy fire concentrated on the Leviathan as the Devourers realized what the humans were attempting. Tony returned fire with every weapon the ship possessed, clearing a path through the swarm of enemy vessels. The ship's adaptive systems worked overtime, predicting threats and adjusting defenses before the crew even realized they were in danger. "The ship is fighting alongside us," Sarah marveled as the Leviathan automatically dodged a barrage of enemy missiles. "It knows what we're trying to do." Admiral Stone's hologram stood beside Jake on the bridge, her expression proud and sad at the same time. "The war giants were always more than just ships," she said. "They were humanity's will made manifest. This vessel wants to protect the innocent just as much as you do." The Prime Harvester grew larger on the viewing screen as they approached. The construct was a nightmare of mechanical complexity, its hull covered in weapons, construction bays, and sensor arrays. At its center, Jake could see the pulsing glow of the main processing core where the virus needed to be delivered. "Devourer, Fighters swarmed around them like angry insects, their weapons tearing into the Leviathan's shields. The ship shuddered under the impact, but it kept moving forward. They were so close now that Jake could see individual details on the enemy construct's hull. Deploying the virus, Dr. Chen announced from his position in the ship's laboratory. 30 seconds to delivery. The Prime Harvester's defensive systems opened fire, massive energy beams that could have destroyed a planet. Sarah threw the ship into a spinning dive, using the Leviathan's incredible maneuverability to avoid the worst of the barrage. But some shots got through, and Jake felt the deck plates buckle under his feet. Shields down to 20%. Tony reported. Hull breaches on decks 15 through 20. Keep us together for 20 more seconds, Jake ordered. The Leviathan's forward weapons tore into the Prime Harvester's hull, punching through layers of adaptive armor to reach the core beneath. Dr. Chen's virus deployment system locked onto the target and fired, sending a stream of quantum information directly into the enemy's central processing unit. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the Prime Harvester's lights began to flicker. The construct's weapons stopped firing, and its production bays ground to a halt. The virus was spreading through the Devourer network, corrupting their shared consciousness and turning their own adaptive abilities against them. Throughout the system, Devourer ships began to convulse as the virus reached them. Their hulls rippled and changed randomly, unable to decide what configuration to take. Some ships sprouted too many weapons and collapsed under their own weight. Others grew defensive systems that blocked their own sensors. The enemy fleet tore itself apart as the virus spread from ship to ship. The Devourer's greatest strength, their ability to adapt and share information, had become their weakness. The quantum plague turned their network into a weapon against itself. Jake watched in amazement as the tide of battle turned. The remaining war giants pressed their attack, destroying confused and malfunctioning enemy vessels. Within minutes, the entire Devourer fleet was either destroyed or fleeing the system in chaos. The UES Leviathan limped away from the dying Prime Harvester, its hull scarred but intact. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew, all of them alive despite the impossible odds they had faced. "Well done," Admiral Stone's hologram said with a smile. "You've saved not just the Zalari, but countless civilizations throughout the galaxy." But Jake knew this was only a temporary victory. The Devourers would eventually overcome the virus and adapt new defenses against it. Somewhere in the dark spaces between stars, other enemy fleets were already learning from this defeat. The war. Giants began their journey home, but they would not return to storage. Humanity had remembered its purpose as the galaxy's protectors. New crews were already being trained, and construction had begun on even larger war giants. The sleeping giants were awake, and they would stand guard against the darkness for as long as the stars burned. Peace was precious, but some things were worth fighting for. The age of the war giants had begun again.